Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, March 8th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, today we have a number of celebrations. We'll start off in Portugal, then head across the ocean to Brazil, and then to El Salvador, and finally back to Italy. So our first celebration is Our Lady of Virtues in Lisbon, Portugal, known as Nossa Senhora das Virtudes, in Portuguese. At least that's how I would pronounce it. It's interesting because until recently, the only thing that was on that site was just ruins, right? But in 2009, they built a small church, and now they plan to continue construction on something bigger, right? The site was protected because of its historical importance, right? There used to be a lot of devotion and many pilgrimages there, but those started trailing off in the 19th century until the 21st, when there's almost no memory of the glory of that place, right? Now, according to tradition, the Church of Our Lady of Virtues goes back to an appearance of Our Lady in the early 15th century. She appeared, it says here, to a keeper of cows. I guess that means a cowherd. The apparition there gave rise to pilgrimages to the site, which later resulted in the construction of a small chapel made of wood and other things that easily decayed, right? However, more people started coming, and King Duarte, who was the king at that time, ordered that a Franciscan monastery be built attached to that little chapel, right? And then again, things just kept growing. So a hospital was soon built, and then inns and other businesses. And this became quite the center of a community. But for whatever reason, these pilgrimages that were so frequent throughout the 15th century started to trail off in the 19th. But hopefully it will be restored to some of its former glory. Then we cross the ocean to go to Nossa Senhora das Lágrimas in Campinas, São Paulo, Brazil. So in 1928, Amália Aguirre was one of the founding members of the Missionaries of Jesus Crucified. And she took as her name Sister Amália of the Scourged Jesus, right? And she became widely known when she developed the stigmata, which later healed, right? The following year, kneeling before the Blessed Sacrament, praying for a relative's dying wife, Sister Amália asked Jesus what she could do to help the young mother. And she heard this answer: "Ask me for the sake of my mother's tears." Right? Ask me for the sake of my mother's tears. That's what Jesus said. And she received 3 prayers. "O Jesus, look upon the tears of the one who loved you most on earth and who loves you most ardently in heaven." Right? And then also, "O Jesus, listen to our prayers for the sake of the tears of your most holy mother." And then thirdly, "O Mary, Mother of Love, Sorrow, and Mercy, we beseech you to unite your prayers with ours, so that Jesus, your divine Son, to whom we turn, may hear our petitions in the name of your maternal tears, and grant us not only the favors we now ask, but the crown of eternal life." It's a very sort of long prayer there, but that's okay. So 4 months later, she actually had an apparition of Mary, and this is what she recalls. She says it was March 8th, 1930. "I was in the chapel, kneeling on the steps of the altar, as suddenly I found myself being lifted up. Then I saw a woman of unspeakable beauty approaching me. She wore a violet robe, blue mantle, and a white veil draped over her shoulders. Smiling, she floated in the air towards me, holding a rosary in her hands, which she herself called corona, like crown, or also rosary, right? Its beads shone like the sun and were as white as snow. Handing me this rosary, she said to me, 'This is the rosary of my tears, which is being entrusted by my son to his beloved institute as a portion of his inheritance.'" So Mary told Sister Amália how to pray the Rosary of Tears, replacing the Our Father's, Hail Marys, and the concluding prayer of the Standard Rosary with those 3 prayers given by Jesus, right? She said that my son wants to honor me in a special way through these invocations, and so he will grant all graces that are begged for for the sake of my tears, right? So on April 8th, 1930, Sister Amália again saw Mary, who revealed a medal of Our Dear Lady of Tears. On the front, around a picture of Mary holding the rosary, are the words, "O most sorrowful Virgin, your tears bring down the infernal empire." On the reverse is an image of Jesus with the inscription, "By your divine gentleness, O manacled Jesus," I think that means like in chains, "save the world from the error that threatens it." right? So in 1934, her institute's founder, Francisco de Campos Barreto, the Bishop of Campinas, gave an imprimatur to the Rosary of Tears and recommended use of the medal, right? Saying that it has already worked many miracles in Brazil and Europe. So again, these are the prayers and medals of Our Lady of Tears in Brazil. Then we'll head over to El Salvador, where they celebrate Virgen de la Luz, or the Virgin of Light, in Mazajaut, in Santa Ana, El Salvador. So this is the end of the town's patronal feasts, which run from March 6th to March 8th. And lastly, they celebrate a Madonna delle Grazie, Our Lady of Grace, in Grosotto, Sondrio. So the shrine dates back all the way to the 400s, which was built in thanksgiving by the inhabitants of the valley because they had been freed from the Grigioni invaders. I don't know what that would be in English, but they were so grateful to Our Lady for that grace that they erected a small shrine, Madonna delle Grazie. And that is what we're celebrating in the Marian world today on March 8th. For today's reading from The Imitation of Mary by Alexander de Rouville, we continue with Book 3, which considers Mary's virtues from Jesus' death until his ascension, so from after his death to the ascension. And today we'll consider Chapter 9, How to Bear the Loss of Dear Ones. So what happens, what should we do when somebody who's close to us passes away? Jesus was dead. How long the time must have seemed for Mary between his death and his resurrection. Jesus was dead. Mary had lost the most loved and lovable of sons. David's sadness at the death of Absalom, that's 2 Samuel chapter 19, verse 1, and the cries of Rachel mourning for her children, Matthew 2:18, express but weakly the sorrow of Mary, now that Jesus was gone and she could no longer hear his voice. But in losing Jesus, this holiest and most devout of mothers lost nothing of her virtue. Her faith in the prompt resurrection of her Son, and her resignation to what God had ordained for his glory and the world's salvation, were her support and consolation. All you whom God has afflicted by taking what you most feared to lose, mother desolated by the death of a dearly loved son, weeping wife who sees yourself prematurely condemned to a sad widowhood, do not lose sight of the model now set before you. Your tears are deserved. Joseph wept at the grave of Jacob his father. Augustine wept at the death of his mother Monica. But learn from Mary to offer God the sacrifice of your sorrow. Learn from her how to bear the loss. Death irreparably cuts the bonds that now unite you to the person you mourn. But have you lost all hope of being reunited? Are you yourself to remain forever in this world? Does not your faith teach you that true believers will be reunited in God's bosom in a more perfect union they could have ever had on earth? We shall rise up someday. What a sweet and priceless hope the apostle offered the first Christians as a means of drying their tears and make them bear peacefully the loss of their brothers and sisters. Do not yield to grief like those who have no hope. That's 1 Thessalonians 4:13. But weep as a Christian who is full of faith. And after you have given expression to natural tenderness, bow your head to God's will. Only our holy divine religion can provide resignation and comfort. Moreover, was this person whom you loved so dearly, and whom death has taken from you, your whole happiness on earth? Did you not love him more than you loved God, who has allowed this separation for reasons before which you should bow down in adoration? This person was dear to you, but God's will ought to be much dearer to your heart. Perhaps your love for this person was not well ordered. Perhaps it was an excessive love, and the bitter, copious tears that refuse to stop are an evident proof of it. Perhaps the person was a great obstacle to pure affection, and in taking him away, God has been merciful to you both. Learn from the affliction not to become attached to any creature. Set your whole affection on him whose years have no end, that's Hebrews 1:12. Or, if you love someone along with God, love him only because God allows you to love him, or because he wants you to love him. Then the love you owe to Jesus will suffer no diminution. Love God in the other person. If you love in this way, you will always be ready, despite natural repugnance and feeling, to accept separation, when God wills it, from the legitimate object of your love. On the day of the sacrifice, your heart will undoubtedly groan, and the tears will spring from your eyes. But you will also will what God wills, and this unity of wills shall put an end to your tears and sighs.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our Marian podcast. As St. John Paul II teaches us, from Mary we learn to love Christ, her Son, the Son of God. Through her intercession, may we grow ever closer to Him. We encourage you to share this with a loved one or friend and help spread our devotion to Mary. Thank you, and God bless.